It is the wind let loose. Swash! It is the rain falling in torrents. This shrieking squall bends down the trees of the Volsinian coast and hurries on, flinging itself against the sides of the mountains of Crimma. Along the whole length of the coast are high rocks, gnawed by the billows of the vast sea of Megaloclida. Swish! Swash! Down by the harbour nestles the little town of Leuctra, perhaps 100 houses with green palings which defend them indifferently from the wild wind. 4 or 5 hilly streets, ravines rather than streets, paved with pebbles and strewn with ashes thrown from the active cones in the background. The volcano is not far distant. It is called the Voglor. During the day it sends forth sulphurous vapours. At night, from time to time, great outpourings of flame. Like a lighthouse carrying 150 kertzes, the Voglor indicates the port of Leuctra to the coasters, Feltzans, Verlich, and Balances, whose keels furrow the waters of Megaloclida. On the other side of the town are ruins dating from the Crimarian era, and then a suburb, Arab in appearance, much like a kasbah, with white walls, domed roofs, and sun-scorched terraces, which are all nothing but accumulations of square stones thrown together at random. Veritable dice are these, whose numbers will never be effaced by the rust of time. Among others we notice the 6-4, a name given to a curious construction, having 6 openings on one side and 4 on the other. A belfry overlooks the town, the square belfry of St. Philphilena, with bells hung in the thickness of the walls, which sometimes a hurricane will set in motion. That is a bad sign. The people tremble when they hear it. Such is Leuctra. Then come the scattered habitations in the country, set amid heath and broom, as in Brittany. But this is not Brittany. Is it in France? I do not know. Is it in Europe? I cannot tell. At all events, do not look for Leuctra on any map. A discreet knock is struck upon the narrow door of 6-4 at the left corner of the Rue Messalier. This is one of the most comfortable houses in Leuctra, if such a word is known there. One of the richest, if gaining some millions of Frritzers, by hook or by crook, constitutes riches. The ratat is answered by a savage bark, in which is much a lupine howl, as if a wolf should bark. Then a window is opened above the door of the 6-4, and an ill-tempered voice says, "Deuce take people who come bothering here." A young girl, shivering in the rain, wrapped in a thin cloak, asks if Dr. Trifulgas is at home. "He is, or he is not, according to circumstances." "I want him to come to my father, who is dying." "Where is he dying?" "At Val Karnion, 4 kertzes from here." "And his name?" "Vort Kartif." "Vort Kartif, the herring soldier?" "Yes, and if Dr. Trifulgas—" "Dr. Trifulgas is not at home." And the window is closed with a slam, while the swishes of the wind and the swashes of the rain mingle in a deafening uproar. A hard man, this Dr. Trifulgas, with little compassion, and attending no one unless paid cash in advance. His old Herzog, a mongrel of bulldog and spaniel, would have had more feeling than he. The house called 6-4 admitted no poor, and opened only to the rich. Further, it had a regular tariff. So much for a typhoid fever, so much for a fit, so much for a pericarditis, and for other complaints which doctors invent by the dozen. Now, Vort Kartif, the herring salter, was a poor man, and of low degree. Why shouldn't Dr. Trifulgas have taken any trouble, and on such a night? "Is it nothing that I should have had to get up?" he murmured as he went back to bed. "That alone is worth 10 Frritzers." Hardly 20 minutes had passed when the iron hammer was again struck on the door of 6-4. Much against his inclination, the doctor left his bed and leaned out of his window. "Who is there?" he cried. "I am the wife of Vort Kartif." "The herring soldier of Val Karnion?" "Yes, and if you refuse to come, he will die." "All right, you will be a widow." "Here are 20 Fritzes." 20 Fritzes for going to Val Karnion, 4 kertzes from here? Thank you, be off with you." And the window was closed again. 20 Fritzes, a grand fee. Risk a cold or lumbago for 20 Fritzes, especially when tomorrow one has to go to Kildrano to visit the rich Edzingov, laid up with gout, which is valued at 50 Fritzes the visit. With this agreeable prospect before him, Dr. Trifulgas slept more soundly than before. Swish, swash, and then rat-tat, rat-tat, rat-tat. To the noises of the squall were now added 3 blows of the knocker, struck by a more decided hand. The doctor slept. He woke, but in a fearful humour. When he opened the window, the storm came in like a charge of shot. "I am come about the herring soldier. That wretched herring soldier again. I am his mother. May his mother, his wife, and his daughter perish with him. He has had an attack. Let him defend himself." "Some money has been paid us," continued the old woman. "An installment on the house sold to the Commandeur du Trop of the Rue Messalier. If you do not come, my granddaughter will no longer have a father, my daughter-in-law a husband, myself a son." It was piteous and terrible to hear the old woman's voice, to know that the wind was freezing the blood in her veins, that the rain was soaking her very bones beneath her thin flesh. "A fit? Why, that would be 200 Fritzes," replied the heartless Trifulgas. "We have only 120. "Good night." And the window was again closed. But, after due reflection, it appeared that 120 Fritzes for an hour and a half on the road, plus half an hour of visit, made a Fritze a minute. A small profit, but still not to be despised. Instead of going to bed again, the doctor slipped into his coat of velveter, went down in his wading boots, stowed himself away in his great coat of lurten, with his sourouet on his head and his mufflers on his hands. He left his lamp lighted close to the pharmacopoeia, open at page 197. Then, pulling the door of 6-4, he paused on the threshold. The old woman was there, leaning on her stick, bowed down by her 80 years of misery. "The 120 Fritzes." "Here is the money, and may God multiply it for you 100-fold.
"God? Whoever saw the colour of his money?"
The doctor whistled for Herzog, gave him a small lantern to carry, and took the road towards the sea. The old woman followed. What swishy-swashy weather! The bells of St. Philphilena are all swinging by reason of the gale. A bad sign. But Dr. Trifulgas is not superstitious. He believes in nothing, not even in his own science, except for what it brings him in. What weather, and also what a road! Pebbles and ashes, the pebbles slippery with seaweed, the ashes crackling with iron refuse. No other light than that from Herzog's lantern, vague and uncertain. At times jets of flame from Vauglore uprear themselves, and in the midst of them appear great comical silhouettes. In truth, no one knows what is in the depths of those unfathomable craters. Perhaps spirits of the other world, which manifest themselves as they come forth. The doctor and the old woman follow the curves of the little bays of the coast. The sea is white with livid whiteness, a mourning white. It sparkles as it throws off the crests of the surf, which seem like outpourings of glowworms. These 2 persons go on thus as far as the turn in the road between sandhills, where the brooms and the reeds clash together with a shock like that of bayonets. These 2 persons go on thus as far as the turn in the road between sandhills, where the brooms and the reeds clash together with a shock like that of bayonets. The dog had drawn near to his master, and seemed to say to him, "Come, come, 120 fritzes for the strong box. That is the way to make a fortune. Another rood added to the vineyard, another dish added to our supper, another meat pie for the faithful Herzog. Let us look after the rich invalids, and look after them according to their purses." At that spot the old woman pauses. With her trembling finger she points out among the shadows a reddish light. There is the house of Vort Kartif, the herring salter. "There?" said the doctor. "Yes," said the old woman. "Hurrah!" cries the dog Herzog. A sudden explosion from the Vauclaw, shaken to its very base. A sheaf of lurid flame springs up to the zenith, forcing its way through the clouds. Dr. Trifulgas is hurled to the ground. He swears roundly, picks himself up, and looks about him. The old woman is no longer there. Has she disappeared through some fissure of the earth, or has she flown away on the wings of the mist? As for the dog, he is there still, standing on his hind legs, his jaws apart, his lantern extinguished. "Nevertheless, we will go on," mutters Dr. Trifulgas. "The honest man has been paid his 120 fritzes, and he must earn them." Only a luminous speck at the distance of half a kertz. It is the lamp of the dying, perhaps the dead. Of course, it is the herring salter's house. The old woman pointed to it with her finger. No mistake is possible. Through the whistling swishes and the dashing swashes, through the uproar of the tempest, Dr. Trifulgas tramps on with hurried steps. As he advances, the house becomes more distinct, being isolated in the midst of the landscape. It is very remarkable how much it resembles that of Dr. Trifulgas, the 6'4" of Lectreux, the same arrangement of windows, the same little arched door. Dr. Trifulgas hastens on as fast as the gale allows him. The door is ajar. He has but to push it. He pushes it, he enters, and the wind roughly closes it behind him. The dog Herzog, left outside, howls with intervals of silence. Strange. One would have said that Dr. Trifulgas had come back to his own house. And yet he has not wandered, he has not even taken a turning. He is at Val Karnion, not at Lectreux. And yet here is the same low vaulted passage, the same wooden staircase with high banisters, worn away by constant rubbing of hands. He ascends. He reaches the landing. Beneath the door a faint light filters through, as in 6'4". Is it a delusion? In the dimness he recognizes his room. The yellow sofa. On the right, the old chest of pearwood. On the left, the brass-bound strong box in which he intended to deposit his 120 fritzes. There is his armchair, with the leathern cushions. There is his table, with its twisted legs, and on it, close to the expiring lamp, his pharmacopoeia, open at page 197. "What is the matter with me?" he murmurs. What is the matter with him? Fear. His pupils are dilated, his body is contracted, shriveled, and icy perspiration freezes his skin. Every hair stands on end. But hasten, for want of oil, the lamp expires, and also the dying man. Yes, there is the bed, his own bed, with posts and canopy, as wide as it is long, shut in by heavy curtains. Is it possible that this is the pallet of a wretched herring salter? With a quaking hand, Dr. Trifulgas seizes the curtains. He opens them. He looks in. The dying man, his head uncovered, is motionless, as if at his last breath. The doctor leans over him. Ah, what a cry to which outside responds an unearthly howl from the dog. The dying man is not the herring salter, Vort Kartif. It is Dr. Trifulgas. It is he whom congestion has attacked, he himself. Cerebral apoplexy, with sudden accumulation of serosity on the cavities of the brain, with paralysis of the body on the side opposite that of the seat of the lesion. Yes, it is he who was sent for, and for whom 120 fritzes have been paid. He who, from hardness of heart, refused to attend the herring salter.
he who was dying. Dr. Trifulgas is like a madman. He knows himself lost. At each moment the symptoms increase. Not only all the functions of the organs slacken, but the lungs and the heart cease to act. And yet he has not quite lost consciousness. What can be done? Bleed. If he hesitates, Dr. Trifulgas is dead. In those days they still bled. And then, as now, medical men cured all those apoplectic patients who were not going to die. Dr. Trifulgas seizes his case, takes out his lancet, opens a vein in the arm of his double. The blood does not flow. He rubs his chest violently. His own breathing grows slower. He warms his feet with hot bricks. His own grow cold. Then his double lifts himself, falls back, and draws one last breath. Dr. Trifulgas, notwithstanding all that his science has taught him to do, dies beneath his own hands. In the morning, a corpse was found in the house 6-4, that of Dr. Trifulgas. They put him in a coffin, and carried him with much pomp to the cemetery of Loughtreux, whither he had sent so many others, in a professional manner. As to old Herzog, it is said that, to this day, he haunts the country with his lantern alight and howling like a lost dog. I do not know if that be true, but strange things happen in Volsinia, especially in the neighbourhood of Loughtreux. And again, I warn you not to hunt for that town on the map. The best geographers have not yet agreed as to its latitude, not even as to its longitude.